The wagon should have broken apart long before it reached the middle of the bridge. One wheel shook so hard it bounced off the wooden planks. Rust flaked from the iron frame with every turn. The old chains hanging from its side clinked like loose bones in the evening wind. Yet Isaiah Carter refused to stop. His left hand gripped the cracked wooden handle. His right hand stayed inside his jacket pocket, wrapped around a small brass key that had belonged to his grandfather. The key was warm. That didn't make any sense. He slowed his steps. Behind him, a pickup truck rolled onto the bridge. The driver leaned out of the window. "Hey, kid," Isaiah kept walking. "You actually paid money for that piece of junk?" Laughter exploded from the truck. Three men in muddy work boots looked at the wagon as if it were the funniest thing they had ever seen. "I've seen better carts at the scrapyard." "You got robbed. $3. They should have paid you to haul it away." Isaiah smiled without looking back. It heard worse, much worse. The truck drove away, leaving a cloud of dust hanging over the bridge. Silence returned. Only the slow creak of old wood and the soft sound of the river below remained. Isaiah stopped in the center of the bridge and looked at the wagon again. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't useful. Its faded green paint had almost disappeared beneath years of rust. One wheel was smaller than the others. The wooden floor was cracked. Someone had carved strange marks into one side years ago. Most people would only see trash, but his grandfather had once said something Isaiah never forgot. "The world throws away things it doesn't understand." Those were some of the last words he ever heard from him. Isaiah closed his eyes for a second. He could still remember sitting beside his grandfather on the front porch during summer evenings. The old man always carried the same brass key. He never explained what it opened. Whenever Isaiah asked, his grandfather simply smiled. "One day you'll know which door deserves this key." At the time, Isaiah thought it was just another story. Now he wasn't so sure. Earlier that afternoon, the county auction had been almost empty. Old tools, broken fences, bent pipes, boxes of cracked dishes, nothing worth buying, at least that was what everyone believed. Near the back fence sat the wagon, covered in weeds, half buried in dirt. The auctioneer barely looked at it. "Anybody want this old thing, starting at $3? Nobody raised a hand. People laughed. Someone shouted, "Burn it!" Another man joked that the termites deserved it more than any buyer. Isaiah couldn't explain why, but something pulled him toward it. As he stepped closer, he noticed one detail nobody else seemed to see. The same strange carving, exactly like the one on his grandfather's brass key, not similar, exactly the same. His heartbeat slowed. He reached into his pocket and quietly wrapped his fingers around the key. The shape matched the carving almost perfectly. Before he could think twice, he raised his hand. "I'll take it." The crowd laughed even harder. The auctioneer shrugged. "Sold. $3. That was nearly all the cash Isaiah had saved after 2 weeks of helping at Mr. Wilson's repair shop. His mother wasn't going to be happy. She already worked double shifts at the hospital just to keep the lights on. Every dollar mattered. Dragging home a broken wagon wasn't exactly part of the family budget. The sky turned orange as Isaiah finally reached the small house at the edge of Maple Creek. The white paint had peeled away years ago. One porch step leaned to one side. An old basketball rested beside the front door. His mother opened the screen door before he even spoke. She looked at the wagon, then at Isaiah, then back at the wagon. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. Finally, she sighed. "Please tell me you didn't spend grocery money." Isaiah shook his head. "My own money." She crossed her arms. "Why?" He looked toward the wagon. "I don't know yet." That answer almost made her laugh. Instead, she simply rubbed her forehead. "You've got your granddad's heart." She turned back toward the house. "I just hope it doesn't break yours." After dinner, Isaiah carried an old lantern into the shed behind the house. Rain began tapping softly against the tin roof. The little room smelled of motor oil, damp wood, and old memories. The wagon stood quietly in the middle of the floor. He brushed away years of dirt. The strange carving became clearer. His hands froze. There was another symbol beneath it, smaller, almost hidden. He pulled the brass key from his pocket, slowly, carefully. He placed it against the carving. It fit perfectly, not inside a lock, against the wood itself. A soft click echoed through the empty shed. Isaiah stepped back. He hadn't turned anything. He hadn't forced anything, but somewhere inside the wagon, something had just unlocked. And it definitely wasn't there by accident. The click was so soft Isaiah almost thought he had imagined it. He waited. Nothing moved. The old wagon sat in the middle of the shed exactly as before. Rain tapped against the tin roof and the lantern flame flickered whenever the wind slipped through the loose boards. Isaiah slowly knelt beside the wagon. His fingers traced every inch of the wooden floor. "There has to be something," he whispered. He pushed against the cracked boards. They didn't move. He checked the iron frame underneath. It was covered in thick rust, but one metal bar looked cleaner than the rest, as if someone had touched it not too long ago. He grabbed an old wrench from the workbench and gently tapped the frame. Clang, clang, then thunk. One section sounded hollow. Isaiah stopped breathing. He tapped it again. Thunk. His heart raced. He slid his fingers under the edge of the metal plate, but it refused to move. Years of dirt and rust had sealed it shut. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. He searched the shelves until he found a small can of penetrating oil. Mr. Wilson had taught him never to force old machinery. "Old things talk," the mechanic always said. "You just have to listen first." Isaiah sprayed the edges and waited. 5 minutes felt like an hour. Finally, he pulled again. The plate shifted only half an inch. Then it stopped. He smiled anyway. Something was definitely hidden beneath it. The next morning, Isaiah could barely finish breakfast. His mother noticed. "You've been thinking about that wagon all night." "I think there's something inside." She looked over her coffee cup. "Money? I don't know. A treasure? I don't know." She smiled for the first time since he'd brought it home. "Well, whatever it is, don't be late for school." Classes felt endless. Math, history, science. Isaiah heard almost none of it. His notebook slowly filled with sketches of the wagon's frame instead of equations. When the final bell rang, he hurried toward the parking lot. A familiar voice stopped him. "Hey, junk wagon." Isaiah turned. 3 boys leaned against a pickup truck, laughing. One of them tossed a crushed soda can toward his feet. "You gonna ride that thing to college?" Another grinned. "Maybe it's full of gold." The others burst into laughter. Isaiah simply picked up the soda can and dropped it into a nearby trash bin. He walked away without saying a word. Their laughter followed him down the sidewalk. By sunset, he was back in the shed. This time he brought better tools, a wire brush, a small pry bar, a flashlight. He worked slowly, brushing away layers of rust until tiny numbers appeared on the hidden metal plate. Just below the numbers sat a tiny stamp, not a company logo, a compass. Its arrow pointed north. Isaiah frowned. Why would a wagon need a compass? He took out his phone and searched for the symbol. Nothing. No manufacturer, no matching design. It was as if the wagon had never existed. That made even less sense. Hours passed. Finally, the metal plate lifted enough for him to shine the flashlight underneath. He expected coins, old papers, maybe a toolbox. Instead, there was only a small leather pouch. His hands trembled. He carefully pulled it free. The leather was dry with age, tied shut with faded blue string. He untied the knot. Inside rested 6 old silver coins and a folded piece of yellow paper, not money, a map. The edges were torn. Rain stains covered half the drawing, but one thing stood out immediately. The same compass symbol appeared in the corner, and beside it, one handwritten sentence. "The second key waits where the river forgets its name." Isaiah read it again, then again. What does that even mean? The brass key in his pocket suddenly felt heavier than ever. This wasn't about hidden cash. It wasn't about an old wagon. Someone had wanted this message to stay hidden for decades. Someone who believed the right person would eventually find it. A gust of wind pushed open the shed door. The lantern flickered wildly. The map slipped from Isaiah's fingers and landed on the floor. As he reached down to grab it, another folded paper hidden inside the leather pouch slid out. It was much smaller. Only one sentence was written across it in faded black ink. "If someone else is already looking, you're too late." Isaiah slowly lifted his head. Outside the open shed door. Fresh tire tracks cut through the wet mud. They hadn't been there an hour ago. Someone had come to the property, and someone had left. Without knocking. Someone had been there. Isaiah stepped out of the shed and stared at the fresh tire tracks cutting across the wet ground. Rainwater had already begun filling the deep grooves, but they were too sharp to be old. He looked toward the road. Empty. Only the sound of frogs from the creek and the steady drip of rain from the oak trees filled the night. His fingers tightened around the folded note. If someone else is already looking, you're too late. The words no longer sounded like part of an old mystery. They sounded like a warning. He quickly folded the map, slipped both papers into his backpack, and locked the shed. Before walking back to the house, he looked over his shoulder one last time. For just a second, he thought he saw headlights disappear beyond the trees, then they were gone. The next morning, the wagon looked ordinary again. Rust. Crooked wheels, faded green paint. Nothing about it suggested it carried a secret that had survived nearly 80 years. Isaiah's mother noticed him staring out the kitchen window. "You barely slept." "I kept thinking." "About the wagon?" He nodded. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your grandfather used to do that." "What do you mean?" He'd sit by that same window for hours, looking outside like he was waiting for someone. Isaiah turned. "He never told you why?" She slowly shook her head. "He always said, 'Some promises aren't mine to explain.'" Those words settled quietly in Isaiah's mind. His grandfather had known something, maybe much more than anyone realized. After school, Isaiah skipped his usual shift at Mr. Wilson's repair shop. Instead, he rode his bicycle to the Maple Creek Public Library. It was a small brick building that smelled of old books and fresh coffee. Mrs. Harper, the librarian, smiled as he walked in. "Research project?" "Something like that." She pointed toward the local history room. "You'll probably find what you need back there." Dust floated through the afternoon sunlight as Isaiah searched shelf after shelf. Old newspapers, county records, property maps, nothing. Nearly 2 hours passed. He was about to give up when one thin scrapbook slipped from the shelf and landed at his feet. The cover read, "Maple Creek Historical Fair, 1948." His pulse quickened. The wagon's hidden plate had been stamped 1947. He carefully opened the book. Inside were faded black and white photographs of harvest festivals, parades, and county auctions. Then one picture stopped him cold. There it was, the wagon, brand new. Its green paint gleamed in the sunlight. The wheels were straight. Children stood beside it smiling. Isaiah leaned closer. Painted across the side in large white letters were words that rust had completely erased over time. River Valley Survey Team, Survey Team? That wasn't a farm wagon. Belonged to people who mapped land. He quickly turned the page. A newspaper clipping had been glued beside the photograph. Most of the article had faded away, but one sentence remained readable. The survey crew disappeared just 3 weeks after completing their final expedition near Blackwater Ridge. Disappeared, every member, no explanation, no bodies, no official report. Isaiah's stomach tightened. "Interesting story, isn't it?" The voice came from behind him. Isaiah nearly dropped the scrapbook. An elderly man wearing denim overalls stood beside the history shelves. He held a stack of returned books under one arm. "You know about them?" Isaiah asked. The old man nodded slowly. "My father talked about that crew. What happened? No one knows. There must have been reports." "There were." "What did they say?" The old man looked toward the window before answering. "They said the men simply packed their equipment one morning and vanished." Isaiah hesitated. "Did they ever find their wagon?" The old man's eyes narrowed. "No." A long silence filled the room. Finally, he asked, "Why are you interested?" Isaiah almost told him everything, the hidden compartment, the map, the coins, the mysterious note. Instead, he simply smiled. "I like old history." The old man smiled back. "History usually likes to stay buried." As Isaiah left the library, the sun was sinking behind the trees. He unlocked his bicycle. Something felt wrong, very wrong. His backpack, the zipper was open. He froze. He was certain he had closed it. His hands shook as he looked inside. The silver coins were still there, the brass key too, but the map was gone. His breathing stopped. He searched every pocket, nothing. He emptied the entire backpack onto the sidewalk, still nothing. Someone had taken only the map, nothing else, not the coins, not the key, just the one thing that showed where to go next. Isaiah slowly looked across the street. A dark blue pickup truck was parked beneath a large maple tree. Its engine was running. The driver's face was hidden beneath the brim of a baseball cap. The truck pulled away the moment their eyes met. Isaiah jumped onto his bicycle and pushed the pedals as hard as he could. Traffic blocked his path. By the time he reached the intersection, the pickup had disappeared, gone, as if it had never been there. Isaiah stood in the middle of the road, trying to catch his breath. Then he remembered something, before folding the map back into the pouch the night before. He had studied it for nearly an hour. Without realizing it, he had copied one small section into the corner of his school notebook while trying to understand the strange markings. It wasn't the entire map, but it showed one landmark clearly. A narrow bend in the river. Beside it, written in faded handwriting, were 4 simple words: "Where the river disappears." Isaiah looked toward the distant hills beyond Maple Creek. Someone else now had the original map, but they didn't know one important thing. He still had the brass key, and somehow, he was beginning to believe the key was worth far more than the map itself. Isaiah barely slept that night. The notebook lay open on his bedroom desk. The rough sketch he had copied from the missing map stared back at him. It wasn't perfect, but one detail was impossible to forget: a sharp bend in the river beside the words, "Where the river disappears." He traced the drawing with his finger. "If someone stole the map," he whispered, "they're already looking." A knock interrupted his thoughts. His mother leaned against the doorframe. "You've been chasing this mystery for days." Isaiah closed the notebook. "I'm close." "Close to what?" "I don't know yet," she smiled gently. "Your grandfather used to say that almost every week." She reached into her pocket and placed a small photograph on the desk. "I found this while cleaning." Isaiah picked it up. It showed his grandfather standing beside the same green wagon many years earlier. His heart skipped. The wagon wasn't abandoned when Grandpa knew it. He was standing beside it, and hanging from his belt was the same brass key. Before sunrise, Isaiah packed his backpack, the brass key, the 6 silver coins, a flashlight, a bottle of water, his notebook. Without waking his mother, he quietly stepped outside. Morning fog covered Maple Creek like a gray blanket. The streets were silent. He followed the old river trail until the houses disappeared behind rows of tall oak trees. The river twisted through the forest exactly as it had on the sketch. Every few hundred yards, Isaiah stopped to compare the notebook with the landscape. Nothing matched, not yet. An hour passed, then another. Finally, the river made a sudden turn around a wall of smooth black rock. Isaiah froze. The bend looked exactly like his drawing, but something else caught his eye. The river didn't continue straight. Half the water slipped beneath the rocks through a narrow opening. It looked as if the river simply disappeared underground. "So that's what it means." He climbed carefully over the wet stones. Cold air drifted from the opening. The sound of rushing water echoed somewhere beneath the hill. He switched on his flashlight. The tunnel wasn't natural. The walls had been cut by tools long ago. Someone had built this passage. The deeper Isaiah walked, the cooler the air became. Drops of water fell from the ceiling. His footsteps echoed through the darkness. Then, his flashlight landed on something unexpected. Old wooden crates, half buried in mud. Each one carried the same faded symbol, the compass. His pulse quickened. The survey team had been here. He brushed dirt from one crate. Inside were rusted measuring tools, broken notebooks, a cracked lantern, nothing valuable, nothing worth disappearing over. He sighed. Maybe he had come all this way for nothing. Then he noticed fresh footprints in the mud, not his, large boot prints, only a few hours old. Someone else had already entered the tunnel. Isaiah turned off his flashlight. Darkness swallowed everything. Voices floated through the tunnel ahead, quiet, close. "He has the key. Then find the kid." Isaiah's heart pounded so loudly he feared they would hear it. He slowly crouched behind the crates. Flashlight beams swept across the tunnel walls. 2 men walked past carrying expensive camping gear. One unfolded the stolen map. The old survey records say the vault is beyond the second chamber. The other laughed. That teenager did all the hard work for us. Isaiah clenched his jaw. They had taken the map. Now they wanted the key. The men continued deeper into the tunnel until their voices faded. Only then did Isaiah breathe again. He quietly followed them from a distance. The passage became narrower. Finally, it opened into a wide underground room. His flashlight stayed off. Only the strangers' lanterns lit the chamber. In the center stood an enormous steel door covered with rust. Across the front was the same compass symbol, and directly beneath it, a keyhole exactly the size of the brass key. Isaiah stared in disbelief. His grandfather had known. The key had never belonged to a house. It belonged here. The two men tried everything, crowbars, hammers, even a battery-powered drill. Nothing worked. One of them slammed his fist against the steel. "We're wasting time." The other unfolded the map again. "It has to open. It won't without the key." Isaiah slowly reached into his pocket. The brass key felt heavier than ever. He understood something now. The key wasn't leading to treasure. It was deciding who deserved to open the door. Just then, a small stone rolled beneath Isaiah's boot. Click. The sound echoed through the chamber. Both men spun around instantly. Flashlights snapped toward the darkness. There! Isaiah turned and ran. Boots thundered behind him. The tunnel exploded with echoes. He dodged around broken crates and loose rocks as beams of light chased him through the darkness. Then, without warning, the ground beneath his feet cracked. The old wooden floor collapsed. Isaiah dropped into the darkness. The brass key flew from his hand. It disappeared into the black water below. For one terrifying second, everything went silent. The freezing water swallowed Isaiah before he could even scream. He hit the underground stream hard. The current pulled him through the darkness, spinning him between jagged rocks. He reached for the brass key, but it was already gone, lost somewhere beneath the rushing water. His lungs burned. Then his shoulder slammed into a flat rock near the edge of the stream. He grabbed it with both hands and pulled himself onto a narrow ledge, coughing as water poured from his clothes. Above him, the voices echoed. "Did you see him? He fell. Forget him. Find the key." Their footsteps hurried away. Isaiah sat still, listening until the tunnel became silent again. The key was gone. The one thing his grandfather had protected for decades had slipped through his fingers. He buried his face in his hands. "It's over." Then something caught his eye. The 6 silver coins had spilled from his backpack onto the wet stone. One coin rested inside a shallow crack in the rock. Isaiah picked it up. The mud washed away in the flowing water, revealing tiny lines carved around its edge. Not decoration, words. He wiped the coin clean. 6 keep one truth. He stared at the other coins. Each one carried different markings. His grandfather hadn't hidden treasure, he had hidden clues. Isaiah laid all 6 coins side by side. Together they formed the shape of the same compass symbol. In the center was a tiny circle. He looked around the ledge. Just a few feet away, carved into the cave wall, was the exact same circle. He pushed against it. Nothing happened. Then he remembered the photograph. His grandfather had never carried only the key. He had always kept a silver coin in his shirt pocket. Isaiah placed one coin into the circular space. A sharp click echoed through the cave. Part of the stone wall slowly slid open. Behind it rested a small metal box, not a vault, not piles of gold, just one weathered steel box. Isaiah opened it carefully. Inside was a leather journal wrapped in oilcloth to keep it dry. Beneath it sat several folded land deeds, and one official document stamped by the United States government. Isaiah unfolded the first page. His eyes widened. The missing survey team had discovered one of the largest natural deposits of rare minerals ever found in the region. Instead of selling the information to powerful land buyers, they secretly protected it. They believed the land belonged to the local farming families whose property would have been taken without fair payment. Before they could finish the legal process, they disappeared. The journal explained everything. Isaiah turned the final page. His grandfather's handwriting filled the bottom. If you are reading this, the truth survived longer than we did. Wealth means nothing if it is built by stealing someone else's future. Return these papers to the families they belong to. Isaiah quietly closed the journal. At that moment he understood. The real treasure had never been hidden underground. It was justice. 3 weeks later, Maple Creek looked very different. County officials reopened the forgotten survey records. Lawyers confirmed the original documents were authentic. The farming families finally received ownership rights and fair compensation for land that had been undervalued for generations. The story spread across the state. People called it one of the most important historical discoveries in county history. No one talked about the old wagon anymore. They talked about the teenager who refused to throw it away. One Saturday morning, Isaiah stood outside Mr. Wilson's repair shop. The old green wagon had been completely restored. Fresh paint covered the wood. The iron wheels shined again, but one small patch of rust remained untouched, right where the hidden compartment had been. Isaiah wanted people to remember where the journey had started. The same pickup truck that had laughed at him on the bridge slowly pulled into the parking lot. The 3 men climbed out. None of them smiled this time. The driver removed his cap. "I guess we were wrong." Isaiah smiled kindly. "It happens." The man looked at the restored wagon. "You keeping it?" Isaiah nodded. "Forever." The man reached into his wallet. "I'd like to buy it." Isaiah gently shook his head. "Some things aren't for sale." The men quietly climbed back into their truck and drove away. This time, no one laughed. That evening, Isaiah placed his grandfather's photograph inside the restored wagon. Beside it, he laid the 6 silver coins and the old journal. The wagon would never carry treasure again. It would carry a story. A reminder that what the world calls worthless may be protecting something priceless. As the sun slipped behind the hills, a warm breeze rolled across Maple Creek. Isaiah rested one hand on the wagon's handle and smiled. He had spent $3, but what he found couldn't be measured by money. Sometimes the greatest fortune isn't what you discover. It's the good you choose to do after the discovery. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes that kindness, patience, and courage can change a life. Until next time, thank you for watching.